Welcome to the Navseam podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 102. My name is Dr. David C. Noe, and I'm here in the vomitorium, south, in the bottom of the bunker, with my good friend and incredible co-host, Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkle. Jeff, how are you?
Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate that.
Which part?
The good friend, and you said incredible co-host.
I see.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. I don't think I've gotten that high praise.
Really?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I stand by it.
Excellent. No, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great. I just came from the classroom as we were just talking to the drive over here, so that always invigorates me a little bit. And so I'm ready to talk some classics. How about you?
I'm feeling resonant.
Resonant?
Yeah, I feel like I have a lot of vroom in my voice.
Yeah.
But I don't have a lot upstairs.
Really?
That's correct.
Okay, you sound like you got the good radio voice going on right now.
I got that part,
Yeah.
but there's no substance.
Okay, well,
I'm going to be like a hollow shell.
Well, don't sell yourself short.
Okay.
We're going to see what happens. It always picks up steam.
You think so?
It does. Yep.
Okay.
So, Dave, what are we talking about today?
We're going to continue on with Vergil and the Aeneid. We're going to be in book 6, and I think we're going to try to wrap it up. Is that right?
We spent several episodes in book 6.
This will be the 4th one, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
On book 6, we're going to bring it home. We're going to exit the underworld, conclude the catabasis, and get ready for the brawl, which is books 7 through 12.
That's right. So it's on to it's up the Tiber.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, we don't have a shout out this week, but we have a listener observation. Is that right? Kind of like a viewer mail.
Yeah,
listener mail.
It's a bit of a corrigendum.
You think so?
I think
All
so.
right.
He's I appreciate it. This comes from one Aaron Potter. Do you remember Mr. Potter?
I don't believe that I ever had Mr. Potter in one of my classes, although his younger brother went to Italy with us. Fine young man.
That's right. Yeah. So I had Aaron in a few Latin classes.
Okay.
Excellent student.
Great.
And I always appreciate his contributions. So I was very happy to kind of receive this.
Yes, and he sent us should we call it a diatribe, or is that unfair?
I don't see really any venom here.
Well, I would like to mischaracterize it from the get-go.
Oh, okay, exactly.
That would make it easier to dismiss it later on.
Well, we can read it with like some seething, kind of dripping with acid.
I can
right?
do that
All
with
right.
a venomy feel.
You wanna get into this? Okay.
Let's see if we can twist these words.
All right.
Salvete, magistri.
It starts out with the Latin greeting. Okay.
Yeah. Hello, teachers.
Yeah.
I continue to enjoy. I'm going to introduce a lot of scare quotes here. Where they don't exist. The listener should imagine I'm flexing the first and second fingers on both of my hands. I continue to enjoy listening to the Ad Nauseam podcast, and though you may find this hard to believe, I don't find anything hard to believe.
Anything?
I'm
Really?
totally credulous.
Okay.
I actually listen to every single episode, even the ones Dr. Noe bemoans as duds.
Okay.
Do I do that?
Sometimes.
I do some bemoaning?
Sometimes you can kind of go down that dark, depressive alley, you know, and I mean there are certain episodes that you'll bring up from time to time and just kind of shake your head at the low numbers, and that kind of thing. But
it's all very deliberate, right? To try to prod people into listening.
Exactly,
to them.
right.
It's a little what do they call it? Dog and pony show.
There you go. But for Aaron here, he doesn't need prodding. He listens to them all.
He does.
I appreciate that. Yep.
Well, go on with what he says next, though, because it's a little bit of a Captain Bring Down.
Oh, okay. So he says, at the moment, however, I'm a few episodes behind, mea culpa. So I only just listened to the episode Use Your Illusion 1 about classical references in pop music.
Okay.
So this is what he's
that was a title of which you were especially pleased.
Still am.
With which you were especially pleased.
Still am, exactly. I look forward to Use Your Illusion too.
All right. He says, in this episode, Dr. Noe argued that the reference to Odysseus and the Sirens was rather obvious in the Mumford & Sons song The Cave. Maybe so, but as a huge Mumford & Sons fan, I wanted to come to their defense and point out a much more obscure reference in the song that you missed, but that I think you would both appreciate.
All right.
The song has a line that goes, "So come out of your cave walking on your hands," which Dr. Winkle pointed out as a reference to Plato's allegory of the cave, which it most definitely is.
All right.
That seems like a little bit of special pleading there, Aaron. It most definitely is because you say it most definitely is.
Well, remember, he was my student, so I think I think I may have kind of a bond here with
All right.
Aaron that you don't.
Why don't you continue?
Okay. He says, however, and much more obscurely, it is also a near direct quotation from G.K. Chesterton's biography of St. Francis of Assisi. Quote, Francis, at the time or somewhere about the time when he disappeared into the prison or the dark cavern, underwent a reversal of a certain psychological kind. The man who went into the cave was not the man who came out again. He looked differently. He looked at the world as differently from other men, as if he had come out of that dark hole walking on his hands. That's really interesting.
It is. I'm persuaded.
Right. So I remember when we did that episode, it was that element that puzzled us, right? Coming out of the cave, okay, that's platonic.
Yep.
But why is he doing a handstand?
Right.
Okay? And so apparently this is it.
This is it.
Yeah.
Nice job, Aaron. He says, as someone who loves all of the people involved in this illusion, Plato, St. Francis, Chesterton, Mumford and Sons, Jeff, he doesn't name us.
I know. I'm going to try to ignore that and give him the benefit of the doubt.
He says, I just love knowing this and seeing how many layers the song has to dig into. To cite my sources, I have to admit that this isn't an illusion I spotted on my own, but one brought to light for me when a speaker whose name I don't remember shared this song in a chapel service when the song was new and I was still a high school student.
Also, some guy up there with a guitar just mentioned this?
I guess so.
Oh, man. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe that was the way in which the person, justified its use in a chapel service. By the way, I can connect this to G.K. Chesterton.
There you go. Yeah.
I don't know. You want to conclude for us?
Yes. So he writes, still, that just shows the importance of teachers sharing the classics with the younger generations because it has stuck with me ever since. I hope you are both having a wonderful fall, and I look forward to listening to more excellent and erudite ad nauseum content. Quality.
Yeah. That's really nice.
That is very nice.
Maybe that's better than a shout out, Buster.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I think that functions as both.
Okay.
He added something to it. It was kind of a gentle correction, but I found this very, very interesting.
He threw in lots of, compliments and kind things so that we wouldn't get our dander up.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I do have a question, though.
Yes, please.
At the risk of kind of going off on a rabbit trail. Do you know this story of St. Francis going into the cave? I don't know that element in his biography.
No.
Okay.
No, we have both been to Assisi.
We have.
On that cold January day where men were stationed outside the basilica with Tommy guns. Remember that?
I do remember that. A beautiful medieval hill town.
Very nice. Yeah. And an elaborate tomb.
Yes.
Almost as much marble in that tomb as in the Vatican.
Yeah.
I mean, probably not, but an amazing amount of marble.
Right. And in a fashion that I think maybe would have troubled St. Frankie himself.
I think so.
I wouldn't have imagined being buried in such, opulence.
No, extravagance. Yeah. Maybe not. I don't remember that story. I only remember the standard stories of St. Francis.
He had a thing for animals.
Preaching to the birds. Well, He said, if men won't listen to me, I'll turn and go to creation and I'll speak to them. Right. Which has a, kind of a biblical precedent. Isaiah chapter 1, check it out.
There you go. Oh, nice. Right. And I suppose in a kind of standard kind of spiritual biography, it's kind of the catabasis of going into the desert, right, and to confront demons your own and other, and then you come back returned and changed and cleansed.
Yes, well, he was an aristocratic young man, wealthy, and just grew disillusioned with the life that had been planned for him. He got tired of drinking lattes and scrolling Twitter and said, I have to do something more important with my life.
Right. Well, thanks, Aaron. That was great. I appreciate that. So maybe when it comes to that was always my thing I was nervous about with the use your illusion, is I thought, well, there's going to be people out there who know these songs better than I do, than we do.
Yeah.
And they're going to be scoffing.
Yes.
So I appreciate Aaron's approach. He didn't scoff. He just said, hey, I can add to that and make it more interesting, which he did.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So Jeff, you have the opening quote for today's journey into all things Vergil.
Right. And so this is an article called from an article called Aeneas and the Gates of Sleep from one R.J. Tarrant, from an article from Classical Philology way back in 1982. And this refers to, so when we'll get to this at the very end of the episode, I hope. Aeneas leaves the underworld. He has a choice of two gates. And he can go by the gate of true dreams and the gate of false dreams. And he leaves by the gate of false.
Nicknamed Bill and Melinda, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
He leaves by the Bill and Melinda gates, right? False dreams. And that has been one of the things, like the sticky bow, like we were talking about. Like, what does this mean?
Cunctantem,
right? And so the falsa insomnia, what does this mean? So Tarrant writes, the oblique connection of Aeneas and falsa insomnia, however it operates, must have a negative effect. The associations of deception, illusion, and unreality are disturbing, even ominous. This view of Aeneas' departure might seem to clash with the glorious vision of Roman history which Anchises has revealed to his son. But it is important to recall that Anchises' prophecy does not end with the triumph of Augustus, but with the early death of Marcellus. The fate of the young man is lamented at such length and with such violence of emotion that the rest of Anchises' prophecy, containing the instructions for which the entire journey was made, is thrown into shadow. The book ends in an atmosphere of muted grief. Note, for example, the absence of direct speech after line 886. In this respect, it resembles the four preceding books, each of which ends with the loss of someone close to Aeneas. We've talked about this, but as Tarrant writes this, it strikes me that I didn't notice that as a pattern.
No.
That there's each of these books ends with a loss.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So book one is the death of Anchises is at the end of book one? No, that's not
No, I
right.
think it's later. I'm forgetting with book one, but of course the death of Dido.
Right. Book two is the fall of Troy, death of Creusa.
They find that the body of their not the helmsman, but one of their
Palinurus.
The Palinurus dies, but they also kind of find the body of someone washed up on the beach that they have to take care of. So I thought that was interesting that it's already a pattern that's set, and book six ends with another a loss, albeit a future loss from the point of view of the characters.
Right.
So the phrase "sociosque revisit" invites backward glances of this kind, recalling two earlier occasions when Aeneas returned from a shattering personal experience to find his ships and men waiting, a visible reminder of his mission and destiny. So Tarrant interprets the false insomnia as there's no way around it. This is dark. This is negative. And you have to kind of read that against kind of the glory of Rome to come and deal with it. So other kind of interpretations I was reading in preparation for this episode this week have lots of scholars have kind of twisted and turned themselves into knots to say, no, the false dreams doesn't mean something negative. There's no way that Vergil would have tempered this praise of Augustus with such kind of a down note. But I'm with Tarrant here that you see that kind of tempering of the glory with the down note throughout the first half of the book,
right?
First half of the epic, right? So when we get around to it, maybe we can kind of come back to this and kind of see what we think. But that is a scene that's always kind of troubled me: is why does Aeneas leave by the gate of false dreams, and what on earth could that possibly mean?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't really have an answer. I wonder if part of it is part of the confusion is occasioned by the translation of falsa, where falsa insomnia maybe doesn't have to mean dreams that are not true, as in things that did not happen, but they are falsa in the sense that they lead us in a direction we didn't want to go, or they have some element of deceit in them, not because they're not basically true, but because they lead to consequences we don't like.
I like that a lot. Because I think that you can fall into that trap of just taking the easy cognate there. Oh, falsa, untrue, didn't happen. But the range of that word is much bigger than that.
Right, and these are things that happened, right? Each of these is a thing that happened.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So all of I believe I was also reading all of the things that are mentioned as a prophecy,
right,
by Vergil's time had already happened. The one thing that has not happened or doesn't happen is that he says the empire of Augustus will reach all the way to the Indus River.
Right.
That's the only thing in the prophecy that hasn't happened
and never did.
And never did happen. Right. But everything else is it has come true. And so that's what some of the writers I was reading is saying. Well, how can they be false dreams if, from the point of view of Vergil and his audience, they've already happened?
Yes.
So how? So is it referring to something else, or is it kind of arguing that everything that we see as kind of naturally glorious and triumphant is that it carries with it its own cost?
Yeah.
That strikes me as very Vergilian.
Yeah. Well, falsus has the sense of disappointing, hollow, right? Something that makes you hurt. Not simply something that is the opposite of verum.
Right. Yeah.
Just an idea.
All right. Well, let's see where this goes. But we're not there yet in the story. We got to back up. So So where do we start here?
We start with the first segment, which is on the concept of Roman reincarnation.
Yeah.
Which has a metempsychosis, right? Is the Greek word. The soul lives afterward, or reincarnatio.
Mm-hmm. And so Anchises here is showing. He's showing his son around, giving kind of a tour of the underworld.
Yes.
And so we're not quite up to kind of this grand array of great Romans to come, but he's kind of showing how the underworld works. Right? And so here in Elysium, under kind of the eternal sun and this kind of Roman heaven, Anchises shows that it doesn't end here, but souls are cleansed, and this is how they kind of come back into the land of the living.
They're laundered, as we said last time.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to read us a little Latin here?
I would love to. So this begins at line 723. Suscepit anquis seis at cordina singula pondit, principio cae lacteras composque lucentem que globum lunae titania quastra, Spiritus intus alito tam quinfusa per artus, mens agitatmo let magnose corpora miscet, in dominum peccadumque genus vitaeque volantum, et quae marmoreo fert monstra sub aequora pontus.
Nicely done, as always.
Thank you, Jeff.
Let me give the Lombardo translation, which as is our practice, those lines, but also a bit more. Lombardo translates, Anchises answered, and he revealed the mysteries one by one. First, heaven and earth, the sea's expanse, the moon's bright globe, the sun and stars are all sustained by a spirit within. Every part is infused with mind, which moves the whole, the source of life for man and beast and all winged things. And the monsters of the marmoreal deep, a divine fire pulses within those seeds of life, a celestial energy, but it is slowed and dulled by mortal frames, earthly bodies doomed to die. And so men fear and desire, sorrow and exult, and shut in the shade of their prison houses, cannot see the sky. Nor when the last gleam of life flickers out, are all the ills that flesh is heir to completely uprooted, but many corporeal taints remain, ingrained in the soul in myriad ways. And so we are disciplined, and expiate our bygone sins. Some souls are hung to spread to the winds, others are cleansed under the swirling waters or purged by fire. We each suffer our own ghosts, then we are sent through spacious Elysium, and a few enjoy the blessed fields until the fullness of time removes the last trace of stain, leaving only the pure flame of ethereal spirit. All these, when they have rolled the wheel of time through 1,000 years, will be called by God in a great assembly to the river Lethe, so that they return to the vaulted world with no memory and may begin again to desire rebirth in a human body.
That's very nicely read, and what a fantastic translation.
It's a great translation. I wanted to make kind of a couple of observations, and this kind of comes out of the fact that I'm teaching a world religions class right now.
Okay.
And it seems like, I want to get around, of course, kind of this notion of reincarnation and the drinking from Lethe. But it strikes me as, it reminds me a lot of how, like the nirvana experience of the Buddha is often described, is that, when he has that enlightenment underneath the Bodhi tree, what is he experiencing? But it's kind of this notion that in a glance, he seems to kind of understand how everything is connected together,
right?
In this almost indescribable way. And so apparently Anchises has kind of this gift. Not only is he living in the blessed fields, but he also has a deep understanding how all of this works.
Right.
Or also, this is also how, like, the night journey of Muhammad is often described, when he's kind of taken up by the gods and by Allah, and he shows Muhammad kind of how all of life and heaven and eternity is kind of fits together. And it strikes me as also kind of a nice corollary to what we see here. So,
fascinating.
Yeah, I don't really have kind of an argument beyond that. Just kind of struck me as like, I've seen this story before.
Right. Well, the connection to Plato, right, of course, is that there are many, many theories, some more plausible than others, that Buddhists or Indian philosophers journeyed west and had contacts with the Greeks.
Yeah.
And the gymnophysicists, right, the naked philosophers of India. And so there is a plausible, but ultimately probably not provable, argument that Plato was directly inspired by this Eastern kind of religion.
Right.
As for Muhammad, I don't know
where that comes from. Right. It's even really striking about how if you look at the biographies and the wisdom of Socrates and compare that to Confucius.
Right.
Now, Confucius's dates, he's much more kind of quasi-historical than Socrates is, but they roughly kind of from the same era, give or take 100 years or so. And it's almost the trope of the ugly philosopher who kind of roots his wisdom in the fact that, I am wise in that I claim to know nothing, that I don't ultimately know anything.
Right.
How do you explain those grand seeming coincidences without kind of resorting to an argument of there must be some kind of cross-cultural exchange going on?
Right.
Here?
Well, a natural law argument covers it.
I suppose.
Not that many people would find that necessarily persuasive, but that these ideas are just common to humanity and they emerge in different places at different times.
True. Yep.
In very much the same form. This is C.S. Lewis's idea of the Tao, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is down today about 400 points, if I'm not mistaken.
I always try to keep my eye on the Tao, but it's depressing.
Right.
So, but yeah, this is, it's reflective of, I saw some stoicism in there, right?
Oh, yes.
Each being carries the celestial gleam.
Right. Well, the Stoics, of course, claim that they are the only genuine descendants of Plato. And they probably have the best claim to that, certainly over the Epicureans.
Yeah.
But what Vergil is doing is adopting a basic Platonic psychology so that he can tell his story.
Yeah.
I think he probably also believes in it, but I don't know.
Do you think so?
Who can know?
Right. I mean, it's maybe an impossible question to ask.
I think so.
Right.
It's very fashionable. Maybe it's very easy to think that the artist, the poet, does not believe the things he's saying.
Yeah.
But I find that the most compelling and persuasive works of art come from an individual who authentically believes in the truth of what he's saying.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A question I often get with my myth students is when we talk about Odyssey Book 11, the Nequia, is they ask that, okay, to what degree did the Greeks believe this?
Right.
How can we treat this like a holy scripture? And that's a really hard question to answer. I was reading a book from one of my favorite scholars of kind of ancient religion, Jan Bremer, and he made a claim. He was talking about things like Book 6 of the Aeneid and Book 11 of the Odyssey, but then he says the likelihood that the majority of ancient Greeks and Romans believed in this is highly unlikely, and they left it there without a footnote. And I went, okay, why?
Because he says so.
Because he says so.
This is special pleading once again, right?
Yeah. So I don't know about that. I mean, in the way that that the Greeks and the Romans kind of revered Homer, it would actually strike me as very
the opposite.
The opposite, right? They would see these things as deeply influential in how they saw these things. But
to the extent that they had any kind of sacred text, it was Homer,
right?
And I think that the general pattern of interpretation, Werner Jaeger once again, is that Plato is the odd man out. He's the oddball, right? He's the sore thumb. You can chart all of Greek history as before and after Plato.
Right.
Because he is the first one seriously. There was Xenophanes before, but he is the first one seriously to question the religion and mythology of Homer.
Exactly.
So even though he greatly respects Homer, his dialogues are a direct challenge to the Homeric worldview.
Exactly. I mean, he will quote Homer.
Right.
Socrates quotes Homer a lot, but it's not just a kind of a pure acceptance of
Definitely not.
Because Homer said it, therefore it must be true.
It's an approval of the artistry and the beauty.
Exactly.
Not of the propositional content, you might say.
Exactly, right. So there's a lot of kind of what seem to be kind of purely Platonic aspects to this notion of reincarnation. And one of the things that's always struck me and always puzzled me too is that, I mean, it's a similar kind of story that we see in Plato's myth of right?
Yes, from the Republic.
Right, and the drinking from Lethe. And also this idea that, well, who gets to be reincarnated? It's the best of the best. And so that is often kind of strike me as in some ways very un-Platonic. But Plato had a very jaded view on the land of the living and humanity to some degree.
Help me understand what you're saying. That Plato had a low view of political authority and those who were considered the elite.
Well, I mean, he certainly had a low view of democracy, right? And so I think he had a very low view of kind of the most of humanity. But at the same time, that if we say if the myth of is reflective of Plato's true belief, did he hold these metempsychosis beliefs? Who's being reborn back into the universe? It would seem to suggest that humanity would be getting better,
right?
Because only the best of the best come back to us,
right?
And that's what Anchises seems to be saying here. Now, the best of the best are the
Roman heroes,
the great warriors, and exclusively male. It also appears, but that it strikes me as kind of oddly optimistic. I mean, through the lens. I mean, if you accept what the Greeks and the Romans considered to be, quote unquote, great, this is a very optimistic view of kind of where humanity is going, isn't it?
Yes, I suppose it is.
Yeah, and so I don't know quite what to do with that.
Consistent improvement, you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're pointing to something that we won't be able to discuss in full until we get to the end of Book 12, which is the interpretation of the epic as a whole, and you're touching on C.S. Lewis's interpretation, which I think we'll foreshadow here just so we don't tease the audience endlessly.
Okay.
And he says in his preface to Paradise Lost that after Vergil, the only direction in which epic could go is religious. We're done with the personal epic of Homer. They're basically personal epics.
Yeah.
Then Vergil has the epic of national destiny, right? So not the individual, but now we're all in this together, right? And that's why Aeneas represents not himself, but he is the Roman.
Right.
What's left for the development of epic? And so Lewis says the only avenue left for the development of epic is a fully religious epic. And that's what John Milton does with Paradise Lost.
Right. And Dante too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Although he seems to suggest, if I remember correctly, that Dante is still trying to tap into the Vergilian mode of a kind of national destiny.
Excellent. I'm not familiar with that part of Lewis's work, but that sounds fascinating.
Well, we should maybe just discuss it and in some episode because it's a very astute, I would say, read of the epic tradition.
Excellent. So in that same article from the opening quote,
Tarrant, right?
He addresses kind of this issue of kind of, well, what is Vergil borrowing from here? What's the philosophy behind it? And he writes, it would be wrong to suggest that the outlook of the Aeneid is consistently Platonic, any more than it is consistently Stoic or Epicurean. Instead, Vergil seems to have found Plato's view of the physical world as a mere shadow of a purer world, a useful structure of thought by which to express his own sense of the evanescence of mortal aspirations. This awareness, however, coexists with an equally strong feeling that the mission of Aeneas will have a permanent and beneficent influence on human history. In the passage under discussion, Aeneas appears as a human being with all of man's tragic limitations. Elsewhere, particularly in Book 8, the founder of Rome assumes a nearly divine stature. So he's suggesting here that he will use he cherry picks.
Yes,
right. He's kind of using kind of a Platonic worldview to kind of paint a particular picture.
Yeah, that Vergil doesn't really believe in this in any profound sense.
Right.
But like you just said, he's using it to carry across the ideas that he wants to express.
Right. And so it's not. It would be wrong. I think Tarrant's argument it would be wrong to kind of look at this section of Book 6 and say, oh, he's making a Platonic argument. He's not. He's using a Platonic sheen to tell a particular story.
That seems persuasive. I think that in the modern conversation, Platonism is often grossly misunderstood. Many people believe that Plato thought that the body is inherently evil.
Right.
The expression soma sema, right? That the body is a tomb, soma sema.
Yes.
But I think that's more of a Manichaean view and a Gnostic view. And in the first 300 years after Christ, the Platonists and the Gnostics were as antagonistic as the Christians and the Gnostics.
Right.
Because the Platonists did not think that the body was pure evil. They just believed it was the locus of all of the bad things that are happening to the soul.
Right.
Right. So, yeah, it is a bad state for a soul to be trapped in a body, but just because there are contaminations contemporaneous with that condition. And if you could just be free from the body, you'd be free from the contaminations that go along with it.
Yeah.
It's not that it's inherently wicked.
Right. But that's certainly, I mean, I've heard that
over and over.
glibly stated so many times.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Right. And yeah, you have to take into account, too, is that by the time you get to the Gnostics, and then you have what's called Middle Platonism,
right.
Neoplatonism.
Right.
You're hundreds of years away from the man himself.
Yes,
right?
800.
And
practically.
You do yourself a disservice if you're not treating each of those things as kind of unique with their own particular kind
Correct.
of view. Right. But to boil it down to say, well, this is what Plato believed.
Is simplistic.
Is simplistic. Yep.
Good point.
All right. Now we got some future Romans coming down. From the point of view of Aeneas, these are
parade.
The parade, right? Are you ready for a parade?
No, not really.
No.
the streamers and the screamers and the flying candy and the balloons and
the bands.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's there not to hate?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, politicians handing out slips of paper.
Yes.
Vote for me. Yeah. No thanks.
Right.
Yeah. So
we're coming up on parade time too, right?
Are we?
We have a general election next week.
Next week, that's right.
And I think probably this episode will come out on the very day of.
That's right.
Are we going to be topical?
No, I think let's keep politics out of it.
Let's rise above all the hullabaloo.
Exactly. Like I hate it when my favorite musician, from the stage will start pontificating about the capital gains tax.
Right.
Just play the song, right? So let's not be those guys.
You're not suggesting we're someone's favorite musician, are you?
I think for some people we are their favorite podcast.
All right.
Yes, I think we've heard as much. Right.
We're very popular in Buffalo.
Huge in Buffalo.
Yeah. I just learned this week that someone from Buffalo is called a Buffalonian.
Really?
Did you know that?
No, a Buffalonian.
A Buffalonian.
Man. We are Michiganders.
That's correct.
That's a pretty unique one.
Couple slices of rye and a little mustard. You got a sandwich there.
A Buffalonian?
That's right. So here comes the parade from the Valley of Souls.
Right. So the first one that shows up is Silvius, which is Aeneas' last son with Lavinia. Right.
So he's going to be born pretty soon.
Yeah.
Who is Lavinia, Jeff? You got to fill in the listener here.
Right. So we'll get to probably in next week's the episode after this one. We'll be talking about Book 7. Right. And so Aeneas and the crew, they make their way get up the boot of Italy and ultimately come to the site where Rome will soon be. And they meet Latinus, the King Latinus, and his daughter Lavinia.
And Latinus, of course, is the cult founder of the Latins, right? Which is a tribe, a sub-tribe on the Italian peninsula that Aeneas and the Trojans will absorb.
Yeah, and that guy, Latinus, he is relaxed.
You like him?
Well, I'm not sure if I like him, but it's, the strange group of people comes and they say, hey, can we have some of your territory to build a city? Sure.
Right. And by the way, our leader's going to marry your daughter, who's already engaged to this other guy, Turnus, that you spent a lot of time with at the football game and so forth.
Exactly. Right. Go for it.
Right.
Now, granted, he's received an oracle that basically says this is how it's going to go. And so he says, who am I to fight destiny? And so he just has to have it. But he's very welcoming of this strange group of people showing up in these boats.
It's partly to be a foil to his wife.
Well, yes.
Amata.
Right.
Or lovey.
Lovey, exactly.
That's what her name means.
Right.
And she's anything but.
Yeah, exactly. She becomes a kind of a fury incarnate, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Possessed by Electo. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We are getting ahead of ourselves. So Lavinia is ultimately who Aeneas will marry.
His third wife, so to speak.
Exactly.
Right? After Creusa and then the not romance with Dido. Lavinia is where it's at.
Right. And so they have a son, Silvius. He'd be, foresty, tree guy.
Yeah, Forest.
There we go.
Conquer Italy, Silvius. Conquer Italy.
Yes.
That's supposed to be like the run, Forest, run.
Oh, there we go.
I just didn't do it with a proper accent.
Run, Forest, run. So lots of people coming forward. That Anchises is stressing that this is kind of Trojan blood mixed with indigenous Italian blood, and Silvius is going to establish a line of kings that will rule at Alba Longa.
Alba Longa,
yeah,
the White Hills of Alba Longa, which is, I believe, I'm going to get my geography off here. I better check during the break. I believe northeast of Rome are the hills of the White Hills of Alba Longa.
Is that where they are? I can't even picture.
Better
it.
check.
Yeah.
But this was the legendary home of Rome's first kings before the site got moved to the banks of the Tiber, with Romulus and Remus.
Yes, exactly. So that all of that is to come. But it struck me too. I think I was also talking in my myth class today about like myths of autochthony, and so in these stories,
you're going to define some terms here.
Well,
autochthony,
like from the ground itself, right?
So the Greek terms kthonos, chthon, which is earth, and autos. Self, so springing from the very ground.
Right. And so how these stories were often told to kind of legitimize claims to land, right? So I was talking about, so Cadmus comes from Mesopotamia over to found Thebes, but ultimately it's the Spartoi, it's these the dragon teeth that grow into the men.
The sown ones that come up directly from the soil.
Right. And so those become the ancestral families of Thebes, right? It doesn't come from Cadmus.
No. And, of course, in Athens, we have Kekrops.
Right.
The snake guy who slithers out of the very ground of Athens. And so they can say, look, we've always been here.
We've always been here.
It's the ultimate squatter's rights.
Exactly, right? So not only have we always been here, but we're made up of the stuff, the very soil and rock of the place.
That's right. So it's like when you're sitting in your rumpus room.
Oh, yeah.
You got a rumpus room?
I wish I had a rumpus room.
You need a rumpus room, Winkle.
I know.
Use some of the proceeds from this fabulously profitable podcast to make yourself a rumpus room.
Now, do you have a rumpus room? I remember your previous house, you had one.
Oh, it was a rumpus room.
Yeah, but do you have one now?
I have a rumpus sunroom.
A 3-season rumpus room.
It's a little incongruous. But when incongruous is in session, it's comfortable enough. But as I was saying, when you're in your rumpus room and you're parked on the most favorable spot for watching the game and eating your snacks, you need to use this as a justification for why you shouldn't have to move. When one of the children come along and say, Dad, can I sit there? I want to do extra. No, I'm autochthonous.
Yes. Oh, I'm using
I've
that.
established my spot here on the couch. My territory is clearly marked. It's autochthonous.
I love it. So I see a bit of that here where, it would be a very different story if Vergil would say, here come the Trojans. They just kind of carve out their territory. They kill all the enemies, and it just becomes kind of a Trojan kingdom.
Yes.
But no, it's very important that they mix their blood with the locals.
Yes, Vergil is sophisticated, right? He's wise. He knows that the story can only succeed if it has these elements.
Right. And so I think all of this is I'm going to read a bit from the Lombardo translation, but it reminded me of like the beginning of the book of Matthew, where the argument for why and who Jesus is, who he is we can kind of connect this back to back through the genealogies,
right, all the way to Abraham,
right, yep. Connect them and through David, and so it kind of legitimizes kind of the claim that Jesus is Messiah, right,
and in Luke all the way back to Adam,
right, and so here is a similar kind, I think, argument being made is that we're going to connect Augustus all the way back to these Trojan ancestors and these indigenous Italians.
That's correct. Who will eventually rule first at Alba Longa.
Right.
Which, like the Buffalonian, you put it on some wheat, with a little mayo, the Alba Longa.
Oh, man.
You're good to go.
Oh, man. You're making me hungry, right? I can't tell you the last time I had a Buffalonian. Oh, good stuff.
Can you read us a little bit here of the Lombardo?
Right. And just to let the listener know, these kind of parades of ancestors it's very long. We can only kind of touch upon a little bit at a time. And we can't cover it all. But here, Anchises says, next comes Procas, pride of our race, then Capys and Numitor, and then your avatar, Aeneas Sylvius, equal to you in piety and arms. If ever he succeeds to Alba's throne, look at these young men, their strength, their brows shaded with civic oak. They will build for you Nomentum, Gabii, and the town of Fidena. They will crown Colatia's hills with towers and will found Palmetii and Inuus, Bola and Cora, famous names someday, now places without names. And then a son of Mars will support his grandsire, Romulus, born to Ilia from the line of Assaracus. So we get Romulus coming there.
Yes, there he is.
Right, the founder of Rome itself.
Yes, born to Ilia, who's also named Rhea Silva, goddess of the forest, who slept with Mars and gave birth to the twins.
Right, and there too we have kind of a mixture between kind of indigenous kind of Italian folk belief and Greek, Romanized Greek gods.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's all by design.
Mars as Ares.
Yeah. And then, you kind of skipping over a number of things, Vergil kind of takes the parade up to his own day.
Yes, and Jeff, if I may.
Yes.
Speaking of parades in our own day.
Yeah.
It's time for the ads.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Ratio Coffee. Ratio Coffee started by the inimitable Mark Helwig way out there in Portland, Oregon. Is he still out there?
Absolutely, he is.
Right, they know coffee out there.
They do.
Right, and he has created these wonderful, beautiful machines, the Ratio 6 and the Ratio 8, which I love. I have in my own house. I'm working with the 8 right now.
Yes.
Perfect. Sleek. Yep. Beautiful. Gorgeous. Delivers a perfect cup of coffee every single morning.
Yeah, it's got it's made out of aircraft grade aluminum.
Yes.
Lands on your countertop like a 737.
It does. It kind of hovers and settles.
Incredible.
Yes. Yeah.
And you might be asking, Jeff, I think you are, what's the deal with the bloom phase?
What is the deal with the bloom phase?
Well, let me read to you a little bit from the ratiocoffee.com blog.
Okay.
Because they're going to explain the bloom phase.
Please.
All right. The reason this release of CO2 is problematic... This is the off-gassing.
Yeah.
May not be immediately apparent. It all comes down to how we extract flavor out of coffee. When we pour water over coffee grounds, it soaks into them slowly, but surely pulls all the different flavor components out of the coffee. In order to get good results, it's important to make sure that this happens relatively uniformly for the entire bed of grounds. This is, for instance, part of why the Ratio's wide shower screen is so useful. Do you like a wide shower screen?
I do. I like it. If I had to choose between wider and narrow, I choose wide.
With a Fibonacci head?
Oh, of course.
So what does that do exactly? Well, the trouble occurs when that released CO2 starts forming bubbles and cavities within the bed of grounds.
That's a problem, apparently.
Yeah, so are you with us, listener? You see, you got the bed of grounds. You've got the water, hot water dripping down into it, right, in your coffee maker. But what happens? Well, the CO2, that's what's chemical terms for...
Carbon dioxide?
No, that's still chemical terms.
Okay, sorry.
Bubbly fizzly.
Okay, bubbly fizzly.
For the bubbly fizzly, when it starts getting into the bed of grounds, it gets trapped there, and the off-gassing doesn't occur. So instead of the water uniformly flowing through and between all those little bits, it gets diverted by the bubbles and cavities. That means there are large areas where the grounds aren't having all their flavor extracted.
It sounds fascinating.
You're not with me, are you?
I buy it. I haven't taken chemistry since I was a junior in high school, and I did not do well.
Okay.
Yeah, but it sounds very impressive. And
but you can look at your nice cone where the coffee comes down in from the Fibonacci head. The water comes down in.
Oh yeah.
You know what's going on in there.
Now I do.
Yeah. None of the CO2 is getting trapped in the bubbles and cavities. and preventing all of the flavor from being extracted from your coffee.
So it's very important to getting that wonderful, flavorful brew every morning.
That's correct. If there's no off-gassing, what is it that gets stuck in there?
What? I'm not following you. What?
It begins with brackish and ends with tang.
Oh, the brackish tang. That's oh man, where have I been? Right. So
should we redo this whole ad?
No, we're good. It's good. We're going. The audience is following us.
All right.
Exactly. They were probably screaming brackish tang before I even stumbled over.
Following us into oblivion.
Yeah, right. So listeners, if you're interested, go to ratiocoffee.com. Look at the wide selections there, the beautiful machines, the 6, the 8. Find the ones you want. Type in this coupon code ANCO7B, and that will get you 15% off whatever machine you choose.
Now, the B stands for?
Brackish tang?
There you go.
Or lack of. Right?
No.
Okay.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Hackett Publishing, with offices in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Indianapolis, Indiana, has been providing to a wide audience of readers classics for 50 years now. Jeff, we're nearing the end of the 50th year golden anniversary of Hackett.
We are.
How do you feel about that?
I feel a little sad.
Okay.
Because it's been a great year. But I look forward to many more years of Hackett doing business and providing these wonderful texts.
Yes, and I'd like to just take a little moment to talk about what's on the philosophy portion of their website.
What are you finding?
Well, here are some of the wonderful resources that the listener can acquire. A Companion to Plato's Republic by Nicholas White, a step-by-step, passage-by-passage analysis of the complete Republic.
Wow.
So you want to get the allegory of the cave that we've been talking about here with Mumford and Sons?
Yeah.
You want to get an explanation of the myth of It's all here. The alleged communism in the way that Plato structures his republic with the guards and the communal marriage and so forth. It's all here analyzed by White.
If I wanted to become a philosopher king, could I find maybe a how-to in there?
Yes, there's an instruction manual in the back.
Excellent.
Yes. Also on the page by David Friedlander, Friedrich Schleiermacher, and Wilhelm Abraham Teller, a debate on Jewish emancipation and Christian theology in Old Berlin.
So it's not just classics.
It's not just classics.
Yeah.
Also, a dialogue on personal identity and immortality by John Perry. Disquisition on Government by John Calhoun. A wide array of philosophical titles if that's your interest.
Yeah, so Hackett covers all corners.
That's right.
So, I mean, we're very interested, given our podcast, interested in their classical offerings, and a lot of the translations, most of the translations you hear on the podcast are from Hackett volumes, including Mr. Lombardo's translation of the Aeneid.
Yes, we used him also for the Metamorphoses, which we keep coming back to, but they have the Ambrose translation as well.
Mm-hmm. And the Cresac, also another translation of the Aeneid. So all kinds of stuff out there. I love their volumes. I'm not going to go into kind of how attractive the volumes are, but they're good-looking books.
Yes, they are.
So,
and very expensive, right?
No, very, very affordable, right? So you're getting a high-quality product that is easy on the wallet, especially when it comes to the crime of the cost of textbooks for students these days. Heck, it should be a go-to for every student out there kind of studying in these arenas.
That's why you no longer study chemistry.
That's right.
It's too expensive.
Way too expensive. Those hardcover books, right? Exactly. Door stoppers.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you want to, listener, score yourself some of these wonderful books at a good price, you want to get 20% off that great coupon and free shipping. You need to go to hackettpublishing.com, HACKETT, pick out what you like, drop them in your little grocery satchel, and what's the code, Jeff?
AN2022.
Check it out. You won't regret it.
All right, Dave, so as we get back into it, in this line of Romans to come, Vergil takes it down to his own day and starts naming people very familiar to first century BC Romans.
Yes,
right?
Anyone who studied Roman history.
Yeah. So how about a little Latin here?
I'd love to. Yes.
Yep.
Here we go. This is line 788. Huc gemenas nunc flectacies hanc aspic agentem, Romanos quatuos hic Caesar et omnis Iuli. Progenies magnum caeli venturdra sabaxem, hic est tibiquem promittit saepius audis. Augustus Caesar divi genus ordre condet, saecula quirder sus latior regnata per arve. Saturno quandam superet garamantas et indos, proferet imperium jacet extra sidera tellus, extra ni solis queas ubi caelifer atlas. Oxumero torquet stellis ardentibus optum.
Very nice.
Thank you.
I love the hic weir. This guy.
Yeah, right here. This is the one.
This is the guy.
Hic weir, hic est.
Yeah.
This is he. This right here. And I also loved in 789, the second line. Those of you who are the Latin literati, I'm flattering you here. If you're listening carefully, you heard what's called a spondaic line. The last 2 feet of that line are omnis iuli. 2 spondies.
Does that add like a kind of a solemnity?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
Yeah, it's when the parade goes by, right? You're dealing with elephants, right, and not kids on bicycles with training wheels, right? Because the pace of the whole thing slows down.
So this is the float everyone's been waiting for.
Exactly.
Right.
This is the Star Wars float with the trapdoor in the bottom and everything.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Omnis iuli. That's a spondaic line. There aren't a lot of them in the Aeneid, but they always indicate this solemnity and grandeur, like you're saying.
Right. All right, so Lombardo's translation once again says, "Now turn your gaze here and let it rest upon your family of Romans. Here is Caesar, and here are all the descendants of Iulus, destined to come under heaven's great dome. And here is the man promised to you, Augustus Caesar, born of the gods, who will establish again a golden age in the fields of Latium once ruled by Saturn, and will expand his dominion beyond the Indus and the Garamantes, beyond our familiar stars, beyond the yearly path of the sun, to the land where Atlas turns the star-studded sphere on his shoulders."
Yes, that's great.
It is.
It's great.
Now, this is I think the closest that I think that Vergil comes to being just kind of purely sycophantic.
Unless he really believes it.
Well, I guess so. I guess maybe I'm a little bit too...
You're too cynical. Right. You're kind of jaded. So I don't know ultimately how best to interpret Vergil's attitude to Augustus. I think it is one of the mysteries that will survive to the end of time.
Yeah.
I can say that really until the 20th century, I don't think anyone believed that Vergil was anything but genuinely an admirer of Augustus.
Yeah.
And I think the plausibility of the argument rests upon the fact that it's at the end of 3 generations of civil war.
Right.
You got Marius and Sulla back in the 90s and 80s. You got the first triumvirate. You got the second triumvirate. When Augustus finally defeats Mark Antony, no more war.
Right.
No more Romans killing themselves. Right. Killing one another. So the Pax Augusta, it's pretty appealing.
Sure. Right. Yeah. The hope for something much, much better had to be very much alive. Right.
Correct.
Exactly. So yeah, I'll buy that.
Okay.
Right. And as we were saying early in the episode, is that the only thing that hasn't happened, and as we know from history, does not happen, is that he will extend his rule all the way to the Indus.
Right, past the Indus.
I'm not sure what the Garamantes is. That a river out there? I don't know off the top of my head.
I didn't know off the top of my head either. So I looked it up, and the Garamantes is in northwest Africa.
Oh, okay.
So it's in the Sahara, modern-day Libya, not quite as far west as Carthage, but it represents, as we've said before on the podcast, when we were kids, that distant place was Timbuktu.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe somewhere in Australia. You knew it was real, but you thought it was kind of mythical because you could never go there, and you couldn't find pictures like you can today.
Exactly.
So
reminds me of the mythical place of Tarnation.
Really?
Like what? Where in Tarnation did that come from?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Where exactly is?
I have no idea.
Is Tarnation?
No, I don't know. Or what's the capital of Tarnation?
I have no idea. Right. So yeah. So that's the one part of the grand prophecy that hasn't and won't come true.
No, I think if I'm not mistaken, the greatest physical extent of Roman Empire was under Trajan.
Yes.
The guy with the large pectoral muscles.
Yes.
117 AD, if I'm not mistaken, right before Hadrian. And so it went as far east as the Tigris and Euphrates, west all the way to where? Somewhere in Britain, right?
In Britain, yeah. Well, Hadrian built his wall. Even
after that.
Hadrian said, "I'm not dealing with the Scots.
No, I can't do that.
Let's keep them out."
And west all the way to the Mediterranean,
yeah.
right? And the legends that the Romans sailed to the Canary Islands and maybe even further west. I don't buy it, but possible. Yeah. And then in the south, right, the sands of the Libyan desert. But he never made it to the Indus River. Who did make it to the Indus River, and why is that so important?
Well, Alexander the Great made it there.
That's correct.
And the tradition is that his men finally told him, enough.
I'm not going any further. But that set the gold standard for Eastern expansion.
Right.
And this is why all the Roman generals wanted that so much.
Exactly.
So they could compare themselves.
Right. There's the wonderful story about Caesar. I forget how old he was, but like thinking about, man, I'm in my I'm in my 30s now. Like I'm older than Alexander was when he died. Look, what have I done?
I've accomplished nothing.
Right.
He said, I don't even have my own podcast.
But he used that to motivate himself,
Yes.
right? To greater things.
Right.
So it struck me too is that in some ways the not maybe a little bit in this passage, but elsewhere, the language that Vergil uses to describe the golden age of Augustus is very much like the blessed fields in the underworld.
Oh, yes.
And so I think we're meant to see kind of the one as kind of the mirror image of the other.
Right.
So Augustus is bringing kind of a heaven on earth to us. And we're getting, Aeneas gets a little taste of that just by hanging out with his dad in Elysium.
So are we going to talk about, well said, are we going to talk about this all-star roster of Roman greats?
Oh, I think we have to.
Okay.
Right. So he mentions also figures like Cato, the Gracchi, the Scipios, and all the while kind of making sure that it's clear that they all trace their lineage back to kind of Roman blood.
Yes.
Right.
And how many Catos do we have?
Oh, well, there's at least two Catos.
Yeah,
right?
there's Cato the Elder, right? Cato Censorius, the guy that supposedly hated Greek literature but read it and wrote it himself.
Yeah.
And he wrote the works on agriculture and so forth. And then Cato the Younger, Eutychenses, who killed himself, right?
Right.
During the Civil War.
Yeah, right. So all of those are mentioned. And then it shifts to Marcellus. But before we get to Marcellus, we got to deal with some very famous lines which talk about what makes the Romans different from the Greeks, right?
Yes, correct. And this takes up at around 848, actually 847. So here is Anchises to Aeneas, and he's talking about these are the things that other people will do, right? Mm-hmm. But Roman, this will be your skills or your arts. So I'd like to read a little bit of the Latin, and then we can bring in Lombardo on that.
Please.
Okay. Yep. So it goes, excudenta lii spirantia mollius aera, credequidem vivos ducent de marmora vultus, ordrabunt causas melius cae lique meatus, describent radiet surgentia sidera dicent, tu regerim perio populos Romana memento, hae tiberunt artes paci quim ponera morem, parcera subiectis et debellara superbos.
All right.
And maybe that last line is the most famous, right? This will be your arts. These will be your skills, O Roman. Remember, impose the habit or the custom of peace, spare the downtrodden, and crush or grind the haughty or the arrogant. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because Vergil is both tapping into the way the Romans viewed themselves, their self-identity, and he's also kind of setting the pattern for how they ought to view themselves.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
So the lines that come before this talk about drawing living faces out of the marble, right? Vivos vultus. Others will argue law cases better, and they will trace the movements of the heavens with a compass, and they will name the rising stars. So what do we have here? We've got art and science and oratory. And the Romans always had this sense of inferiority with respect to the Greeks.
Right.
And I kind of understand it. I mean, I can kind of agree that artistically, culturally, the Romans are inferior. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But what do you think about that claim?
No, I would agree with that as well. But I think Vergil's trying to balance it out a little bit here. I mean, he ends with kind of a. I think Vergil's already seems to be aware that the Roman people have a reputation of being kind of military imperial brutes.
Yes,
right, to some degree.
A little slow-witted.
Yes, exactly right. And so here he I mean, those last lines are very military themed.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, yes. Law and order.
Right.
A kind of bureaucracy almost.
But he adds the arts and the sciences as well as theirs. You're called to be learned as well. Mm-hmm. So I think he's countering that.
But you're going to learn it from other people. You're not going to be original in this.
That's true.
You're not going to be creative in this.
Right.
So have you ever read any of Seneca's tragedies?
Yes, and I did not really enjoy them all that much.
No, hardly anybody does. Poor Seneca, right? So for each of the main genres of literature, the Romans would say, yeah, we got one of those. Right. So Vergil's whole project is, I'm going to be the Roman Homer, right? And Cicero said, you got Plato, I can do that.
Yeah.
You got Demosthenes, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so who is Livy's doppelganger?
The Thucydides?
Yeah, probably, or Herodotus.
Yeah.
And you got Sallust matched up with Thucydides. So they're really trying hard to show that we're not culturally inferior.
Right.
But they could never do it. It seems like Horace is the only one who was really honest about Roman inferiority.
Right. But where they do express their originality is in the things that they could build and organize.
That's correct.
Right? They're the great engineers, the great builders.
Yeah, the arch and the use of concrete and all that. So these lines are so important because this is what, Vergil is talking about doing. Spare the downtrodden, but grind the haughty into a pulp.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So Marcellus.
Right. So Marcellus was a nephew of Augustus who tragically died young at aged 21 or so, or 19.
Yes, I think that's right.
Died in 23 BC, which gives us a nice, helps us kind of date the writing of the Aeneid, right?
A terminus.
Yep.
It also is suspected, many scholars believe, that the boy, the puer of Eclogue 4 is Marcellus.
Right. Yeah. Yep. From Lombardo's translation, and Anchises, tears welling up in his eyes, son, do not seek your people's great grief. Fate will permit him on earth a brief while, but not for long. Gods above, you thought Rome would be too powerful had your gift endured. What lamentation of the brave will hang over the field of Mars, O river Tiber? What a funeral you will see as you glide past his new tomb. No boy bred of Troy will ever raise the hope of his Latin forefathers so high, nor the land of Romulus ever be so proud of any of its sons. Oh, lament his devotion, lament his pristine honor, and his sword arm invincible in war. No enemy would have faced him unscathed, whether he fought on foot or dug his spurs into the flanks of a foaming stallion. If only you could shatter fate, poor boy, you will be Marcellus. Let me strew armfuls of lilies and scatter purple blossoms, hollow rites to honor my descendants' shade. So
there's a lot of pathos in there.
A lot of pathos.
Just suffused with pathos.
Right, and Anchises, Marcellus lives centuries after him, he's all choked up by this.
Right.
But this brings us back to, kind of the beginning of the episode, this question of, and we're getting to the kind of the gate of false dreams. But why does Vergil, after all this parade of glory, builds to the climax of Augustus in this golden age, but then he ends with the death of Marcellus in this really sad, haunting note? What is he up to?
I can think of two possible options.
Please.
One is in line with Terence' interpretation, that the death and the misery and the counter-argument, the revisionist idea, is always present no matter how much glory and celebration there is. And the second reason is that this is something that Vergil wrote specifically for his immediate audience, that the popularity and the expectations placed on Marcellus and, the hopes for his future, that these were things that were very live and significant for the contemporary audience, but that we don't really have an idea of.
Yeah.
So it seems out of place because we don't have enough information. We don't have enough context. I don't know which of those two interpretations, or maybe a third, is the more plausible.
I think the two you offered could coexist, right? They don't have to be both.
No, that's true.
Right. So you
don't have to be either, you mean.
That's what I mean. But I think you can kind of almost see kind of this encomium of Marcellus as almost a little kind of set piece. But I think that's a good point. I think it's always important to try to remember who was the original audience of this. Who is Vergil writing for in this immediate sense, and that death of Marcellus would have been a huge deal. For the people of Rome at the time.
A great blow.
Yep. So we got to get to these gates of sleep, the false dreams here.
Right.
We got to get Aeneas out of this place.
Yes, out of the catabasis. Leave the food court, take the escalator up, exit the doors, out into the bright sunlight.
Yep.
Find his Toyota Prius.
Yeah.
And drive on
and drive off.
That's right. Yep. So he can make war.
Right. So, how about a little bit more Latin here before we
I'm
go?
happy to do a lot more Latin. I was getting a little bit of a vibe of you're overdoing it.
Well,
I'm
always worried. Are we getting up against the clock here? I don't. And sometimes, should we cut a little bit of Latin
right
so we can get to the end?
Never cut the Latin.
All right, read it.
I'll just read a few. We'll stop with the elephant, or maybe just after.
Okay.
Sunt geminae somni portae quadrata fertur. That's line 893. So this is a long book. We're right near the end. Cornea quaver ris facilis dater exitus umbris, altera condenti perfecta ni tains elephanto, sed falsad caelum mittunt insomnia manes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We got the insomnia there and the elephant.
All right.
Leaning on an elephant.
Yes. All right, Lombardo, one last time. And so they wandered every region of the wide, airy plain, surveying it all it contained. When Anchises had led his son through every detail and inflamed his soul with longing for the glory that was to come, he told him of the wars he next must wage. So there again, it's kind of the sweetness followed by the bitter, right? Of the Laurentine people in Latinus' town, and how to face or flee each waiting peril. There are 2 gates of sleep. One, they say, is horn, and offers easy exit for true shades. The other is finished with glimmering ivory, but through it the spirits send false dreams to the world above. Anchises escorted his son as he talked, and then sent him with the Sibyl through the gate of ivory. Aeneas made his way to the ships, rejoined his men, and sailed along to the coast to Caiatis harbor. They cast anchor from the prow. The sterns faced the shore.
Very nice.
Thus ends book 6.
Yes, that's it. That's the end. So the elephant that I mentioned,
Yeah.
of course, that's the glimmering ivory.
Ivory.
Yeah.
But I really one of the things I like about Vergil is that he drops these kind of mini bombshells
Right.
and doesn't spoon feed you any kind of answer, right? So
No.
he tells us that the gate of ivory is the gate of false dreams, and then he says Aeneas goes through it, and that's it.
That's correct.
Right? He leaves it to the audience to say, wait, what?
Yes.
Right.
Well, art consists in what you don't say, right? The best writing, it seems to me, even the best movies, if we're going to consider them artistry,
Yeah.
we can argue that out later, are the ones that just suggest things, but they don't tell you everything.
Agreed.
They leave some things open for your imagination to fill in.
Exactly. It's kind of the Hitchcock theory of horror. It's what you don't show is what really kind of lodges in your mind, right? So definitely.
Yeah, and the parts of this podcast that we don't air are the most entertaining.
Exactly. Oh man, the stuff the audience doesn't hear.
Oh, it's great.
It's great stuff. Right.
That stuff is fantastic. I also like the fact that Vergil can vary his register. It's not that every line of poetry is the same. There's a tremendous amount of flexibility reflected in these last lines that you read from Lombardo. They cast anchor from the prow, the sterns faced the shore.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those throwaway details, but not really, right? The sterns face the shore. They're going to pull them up, and this is it. This is the end of the sailing.
Yeah.
But rather than saying, and so their seafaring ended, and they finally came to Italy, and this part of my book is finished, which is so pedestrian.
Yes.
He suggests all of that by saying, they cast anchor, the sterns faced the shore.
The beauty is in its simplicity.
Correct.
Right.
And we're supposed to know, oh, that's it. No more boats.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, as we've talked about, we both appreciate art and music that demands something of the listener, of the audience. Right. You're expected to kind of bring something to it. Otherwise, you're not going to get out of it what you truly, really could.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, what does that mean? The gate of the false dreams. I think that. The impression that I've always gotten, and again, it's that bit of that bitterness that tempers the sweetness, and I think Vergil wants us to kind of to think about yes, the glory of Rome, but it comes with a deep, deadly cost. Just like Anchises just told his son, he says, yes, this glory is to come, but hey, you've got some wars to fight. So everything comes at this deep cost. And so maybe just simply the false insomnia just means that, everything isn't as bright and is always going to be bright and cheery. There's going to be a downside to it.
It's like those chocolate bars they sell now with sea salt.
Oh, yeah.
Have you had one of those?
I'm not a fan.
No? So have you had one?
I have, yes,
Okay.
exactly.
You don't like the rich sweetness mixed with something savory and a little bitter?
It's not my kind of thing.
Really?
But I understand why people like it.
It's because you have to have contrast.
Yeah. I guess so. Right.
Isn't that partly what we're getting here?
I guess so. It's the salty and the sweet, right? Or like I do like a good piece of like dark chocolate,
Right.
And like a very good piece of dark chocolate will in your mouth kind of combine the bitterness and the
Okay.
sweet together. So yeah, I'm with you.
All right.
Okay. So next week we're on to book 7, right?
We're on to book 7. And I think probably shall we do a 1 episode or maybe 2 on 7 before we take a little bit of a break from the Aeneid and go in an unexpected direction?
I think 1 or 2. I think the audience
Yes.
can expect something different.
We're going to get into the Iliadic portion. We got to have some battles. We got to have some bloody fights and heroic scenes. Then we'll take a little breather.
Sounds good. All right. Before we go, Dave, you want to tell us a little bit about the Moss Method?
I do, yes. I would like the listener to go to mossmethod.com, please, and check out many of my free offerings for the teaching of Greek. And if you like the way that I teach, you like the the thoroughness, I don't know, the precision. These are some of the hallmarks of how I teach. Other people, maybe more entertaining, so on and so forth. But I try to be really, really thorough in my instruction. So if you pay attention, you're going to get a lot.
Sounds good.
Check it out. And if you like what you see, you can sign up for the course. It's $325. We're going to be running a Black Friday Cyber Monday sale.
Wait, the Black Friday Monsai?
I know you love that, Jeff. The Black Friday Monsai. It's coming up.
All right.
It's coming up right after the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States. And you can sign up. And what's the slogan we like to use? You go from
neophyte,
right,
all the way up to erudite.
Is there no middle ground? Like what's halfway between neophyte and erudite?
I don't know.
Must you fight?
Must you fight?
Something like
that.
We
need another ite in there.
We
don't
do,
we?
right.
Right.
Check that out, and you're not going to be disappointed.
No.
I've taken several students successfully into a deep and rich knowledge of the Greek language.
Yeah, mossmethod.com, you can check out a lot of free stuff, right? And the course also promises lots of access to you as a teacher.
That's correct.
Right?
You get them office hours every Friday. I'm holding them tomorrow, as it turns out.
Fantastic.
And I'm also offering a Latin program, latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. So this is a from the ground up an ab initio Latin course using Hans Orberg's Lingua Latina per se illustrata. Combine this with the more than 1,900 free Latin lessons I've put on YouTube.
You got that many now?
Yes.
That's amazing.
I'm getting close to 2,000, and pretty much any author you can think of, almost, I have covered in some form.
Fantastic.
And you can access that stuff for free, or you can sign up for the paid course.
Sounds good. Hey, we got some people to thank, as always. Thanks to Mishka for all her hard work in putting this all together, making us sound better than we actually are.
We got the blistering guitar licks of Scott Van Zandt and the bumper music that Ken gives us for the ads. Great stuff.
Great stuff. Really talented guys.
They've got Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy. You can watch him take down a number of classics. It's pretty funny.
Oh, it is very good. I highly recommend it.
Someone described him as, contagiously nice. And Scott also gives guitar lessons if you want to learn to play like that. And, you've got 20 years to practice.
Yeah.
Guy's amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Hey, if you want to shout out, you got a question, you got a suggestion, you got a complaint, you got a correction, write to us. You can write to Dave at dave@adnauseam.com. Don't forget the V. Or you can write to Jeff@adnauseam.com.
Do not forget the V.
Yeah.
We got another nice suggestion this week from another listener. Maybe we'll air that on the podcast next week.
Sounds good. Yeah, check out adnauseam.com. Again, don't forget the V.
Yep.
And maybe pick up a T-shirt.
Yeah, one of the Quae Nocent Docent, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger T-shirts inspired by Erasmus, or Ad Nauseam themed mugs, T-shirts, and hats. Every little bit helps the podcast.
It does.
This is a labor of love and a little bit of profit.
Yes.
So we'd be happy to have your support.
Right. So next week, more Aeneid. And Dave, I believe you have our gustatory parting shot.
I do. And this is from a gentleman named Vikram Seth. And let me just ask, first of all, Jeff, do you like a good mango?
I do like mangoes.
Yes.
Yes.
They're an enchanting fruit, aren't they?
They are. I don't eat nearly enough of them.
No, sweet and intoxicating. Mm-hmm. So Vikram Seth says, quote, "To steel yourself against mangoes showed a degree of iciness that was almost inhuman."
I get that.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.